The champagne bubbles caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows of Romano's, the most prestigious restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina. Amber Clark smoothed her emerald silk dress, the one her husband David had always said brought out her eyes, and watched with pride as their daughter Sophia adjusted her graduation cap. 26 years of marriage, and this was supposed to be their shining moment. Amber had spent weeks planning this celebration. She'd reserved the private dining room, coordinated with both sets of grandparents flying in from different states, and even surprised Sophia by inviting her college boyfriend Tyler, who was stationed at Fort Bragg. The room buzzed with conversation as 43 family members and friends raised their glasses, waiting for David's traditional toast. At 51, Amber still turned heads. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and despite David's constant complaints about their finances, she'd maintained her gym membership and weekly yoga classes. She'd been the steady force in their family, the one who managed their household while David chased his ever-changing business dreams. David stood, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing the navy suit Amber had picked out for him just last week. He'd been acting strangely for months, secretive phone calls, late nights at the office, sudden interest in updating his wardrobe. Amber had attributed it to midlife restlessness. After all, he'd switched careers 3 times in the past decade, from insurance sales to real estate to his current venture in craft beer distribution. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate our brilliant daughter," David began, his voice carrying the charm that had first attracted Amber when they met at the University of South Carolina. "Sophia, we are so proud of your achievement in earning your degree in biomedical engineering." The room erupted in applause, but David wasn't finished. He cleared his throat, and something in his expression made Amber's stomach tighten. "And since we're all gathered here together," he continued, his eyes meeting Amber's briefly before looking away, "I have another announcement to make." The room fell silent. Sophia looked confused, glancing between her parents. Amber felt her heart begin to race, though she couldn't yet name the dread building in her chest. "I've decided it's time for me to start a new chapter in my life," David said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm leaving Amber to be with someone who truly understands and supports my dreams." The silence was deafening. Forks clattered to plates. Sophia's face went pale beneath her graduation cap. Amber felt every eye in the room turn to her, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the public breakdown David clearly expected. Instead, she took a slow sip of her champagne, set the glass down carefully, and smiled. It wasn't a broken smile or a fake one. It was the smile of a woman who had been 3 steps ahead for months. "Congratulations on your honesty, David," she said calmly, reaching into her Hermes purse, the one he'd complained about when she bought it 2 years ago, claiming they couldn't afford such luxuries. She withdrew a cream-colored envelope, sealed with her initials embossed in gold. "What's that?" David asked, his triumphant expression beginning to falter. "Just a little something I prepared for this moment," Amber replied, placing it beside his untouched salmon. "You might want to read it privately later." She stood gracefully, kissed Sophia's cheek, her daughter still frozen in shock, and addressed the room with the same poise she'd learned in her sorority days at USC. "Please everyone, enjoy your meal. Today is still about celebrating Sophia's incredible achievement." As she walked toward the exit, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor, she caught a glimpse of David's face in the mirror. The color had drained from his cheeks as his fingers trembled around the envelope. Behind her, she heard the restaurant door burst open and David's voice, no longer smooth and confident, but high and desperate. "Amber. What the hell is in this envelope? What have you done?" But Amber was already sliding into her BMW X5, the engine purring to life. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe freely. David had no idea that his perfectly planned humiliation was about to become the most expensive announcement of his life. What was in that envelope that made David's voice crack with fear? And how had Amber known this moment was coming? Amber drove through the historic streets of Charleston's Garden District, her hands steady on the steering wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The Spanish moss draped over the old oak trees seemed to whisper secrets she'd been keeping for far longer than David realized. Their home on Magnolia Street had been Amber's dream house when they bought it 15 years ago. The antebellum-style mansion with its wraparound porches and meticulously maintained gardens had been a stretch financially, but Amber's position as senior financial advisor at Coastal Trust Bank had made it possible. She'd been the primary breadwinner for most of their marriage, though David's ego required them to never speak of it publicly. As she pulled into their circular driveway, past the fountain David had insisted on installing during his Italian villa phase, Amber felt her phone buzzing incessantly. Text after text from their friends at the restaurant, from Sophia, even from David's brother Marcus who'd flown in from Atlanta for the graduation. She responded only to Sophia, "I'm okay, sweetheart. Your father's announcement doesn't diminish your achievement. We'll talk tonight when you're ready. I love you more than words can express." Inside the house, everything looked exactly as she'd left it that morning. The family photos lining the grand staircase, the fresh white peonies she'd arranged in the foyer, the antique grandfather clock that had belonged to her grandmother, all of it suddenly felt like museum pieces from someone else's life. Amber climbed the stairs to their master bedroom, her sanctuary that overlooked the garden where she'd spent countless mornings drinking coffee and planning their family's future. She opened the walk-in closet and smiled at what she found hidden behind David's winter coats, 3 expensive suitcases, already packed. David had always been meticulous about his appearance but careless about covering his tracks. The suitcases contained his favorite clothes, toiletries, and several items she'd thought were lost, like his father's gold watch and their wedding album. Planning to take their memories, but not the responsibility that came with them. Her phone rang. "Sophia. Mom, I'm coming home." Her daughter's voice was strained. "I sent Tyler back to base and told everyone else I needed to be with you." "Honey, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Dad humiliated you in front of everyone we care about. I can't even process what just happened, but I know you need me right now." Amber's heart swelled with pride and pain. At 22, Sophia had inherited Amber's strength and David's charisma, a powerful combination that had helped her graduate summa cum laude while maintaining a long-distance relationship and working part-time to pay for her textbooks. "I'll be here," Amber said simply. After hanging up, she walked to David's home office, the room he declared off-limits to her and Sophia years ago, claiming he needed space to focus on his business ventures. Using the spare key she'd had made months ago when her suspicions first arose, she unlocked the filing cabinet. Inside were bank statements for an account she'd never seen before. Statements showing systematic transfers from their joint accounts dating back 18 months. But more damaging were the printed emails between David and someone named Victoria Sterling, discussing their plans for a new life together and their excitement about the announcement after graduation day. Victoria Sterling. Amber had heard that name before at David's business networking events. She was 38, divorced, worked in marketing for a luxury resort development company. The same company David had claimed was a potential client for his beer distribution business. The emails revealed intimate details of their affair, but more importantly, they outlined David's plan to leave the marriage with what he believed would be half of their substantial assets. David had never fully understood the financial empire Amber had quietly built over 2 decades of careful investing and business development. What he'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly comprehended, was the prenuptial agreement they'd signed 26 years ago. Back then, Amber had inherited a significant trust fund from her grandmother, and David, then a struggling insurance salesman, had insisted on the prenup to protect both their interests. The agreement he'd pushed for contained a comprehensive infidelity clause that would prove to be his financial ruin. While David had been planning his grand exit with Victoria, Amber had been documenting everything. She'd hired a private investigator, consulted with Charleston's most prestigious family law attorney, and prepared divorce papers that would freeze their assets the moment they were filed. The sound of David's Mercedes pulling into the driveway interrupted her thoughts. She calmly closed the filing cabinet, locked it, and descended the stairs to face the man who'd shared her bed for over 2 decades while planning her public humiliation. David was about to discover that his wife had been playing chess while he'd been playing checkers. But would his reaction reveal just how deep his betrayal actually went? David burst through the front door like a man possessed, his perfect composure from the restaurant completely shattered. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, and the cream-colored envelope was crushed in his white-knuckled grip. "Amber," he shouted, his voice echoing through their foyer. "Where are you? We need to talk about this insanity." She appeared at the top of the staircase, moving with deliberate calm. She'd changed from her celebration dress into fitted jeans and a cashmere sweater, clothes that made her feel like herself rather than the perfect wife she'd been performing as for so long. "Lower your voice, David. The neighbors don't need to hear your dramatics." He waved the envelope frantically. "Divorce papers? You served me with divorce papers on our daughter's graduation day." "I thought the timing aligned perfectly with your own announcement," she replied, descending the stairs with the grace of someone who held all the cards. "You wanted to start your new life with Victoria. I'm simply facilitating that transition." David's face went from red to pale in an instant. "Victoria? How do you—" He stopped himself, but it was too late. "How do I know about Victoria Sterling? Your marketing consultant who's been helping you plan your new beachfront lifestyle." Amber smiled, settling into the leather armchair that had been her father's. "I know quite a lot, actually. Including the fact that you've been systematically moving our money to fund your midlife crisis." "The prenup expired years ago," David said, trying to regain his footing. "Any lawyer will tell you that agreements like that have statute limitations." Section 15, Paragraph 3, Amber recited from memory. "The fidelity clause remains active for the duration of the marriage and any legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution. Your attorney should have explained that to you." "Oh wait, you didn't consult one before planning this public spectacle, did you?" The realization hit David like a physical blow. He sank onto the couch where they'd once cuddled watching movies, back when their marriage had been real rather than a performance. "You can't be serious about this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 26 years of marriage. Our history together. Doesn't any of that matter?" Amber studied the man she'd loved since she was 25. The one who'd held her when she miscarried their second child. Who'd surprised her with a trip to Tuscany for their 10th anniversary. Who'd taught Sophia to ride a bike and walked her to school every morning until she was too old for such things. "Our history meant everything to me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "That's exactly why your betrayal cut so deep." David's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, his expression growing more frustrated. Victoria, no doubt wondering where he was and why their carefully orchestrated plan was falling apart. "Maybe we can work this out," David tried, shifting tactics. "People make mistakes. Marriage is about forgiveness, about—" "This wasn't a mistake," Amber interrupted, pulling out her own phone. She opened a recording app and David's own voice filled the room. "After the graduation dinner, I'll tell her it's over. The public setting is better, she won't make a scene in front of everyone." Then Victoria's voice, "And she has no idea about the money you've been moving?" David again, "None. Amber trusts me completely. That's always been her weakness." The blood drained from David's face as his own words played back to him. "You recorded our private conversations? That's illegal." "Not in South Carolina when one party consents," Amber replied calmly. "And not when it's recorded in your own home. I didn't violate your privacy with Victoria, I'm not cruel. Just the conversations where you discussed defrauding your wife." David stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. "I need to call my lawyer. This is... Your attorney might want to review the evidence I've compiled," Amber said helpfully. "Bank records, email printouts, photographs from the private investigator I hired. Did you know Victoria has been telling her friends that you're worth more than you actually are? She seems particularly excited about the beach house you promised her." Another crushing blow. David's phone buzzed again, and this time when he looked at it, he groaned audibly. "Problem?" Amber asked. "Victoria's at the apartment. She moved her things in today. She was supposed to wait until after the announcement, but she was too excited." Amber couldn't help but smile. "The apartment on Rainbow Row? The one you put both your names on the lease for?" David nodded, looking confused. "You might want to check with the property management company. That application was flagged for income verification issues and never approved. The agent called our home phone to confirm your employment status. I handled it personally." The sound that escaped David's throat was somewhere between a sob and a scream. His perfectly planned new life was unraveling faster than he could process, and Amber was orchestrating every revelation. But the afternoon wasn't over yet. The front door opened, and Sophia walked in, still wearing her graduation dress but with her cap missing and her makeup streaked from crying. "Dad," she said, her voice cold in a way Amber had never heard before. "We need to talk." What would Sophia say to the father who had destroyed their family's most important day? And what other secrets was Amber still holding that could bring David's world crashing down completely? Sophia stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, her graduation dress wrinkled from the emotional afternoon, her usually perfect composure replaced by a fury that made her look older than her 22 years. David rose from the couch, relief flickering across his face at seeing his daughter. "Sophia, sweetheart, I'm so glad you're here. I need you to understand that sometimes in life—" "Stop." Sophia's voice cut through his words like ice. "Just stop talking, Dad. I've heard enough of your explanations for one day." She moved into the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors with the same commanding presence her mother had displayed at the restaurant. Amber felt a surge of pride mixed with heartbreak. Their daughter was stronger than either of them had realized. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sophia continued, her green eyes blazing. "Today was supposed to be about my achievement. 4 years of engineering school, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while working 20 hours a week because you said money was tight. And you used my graduation as the stage for your midlife crisis announcement." David flinched as if she'd slapped him. "That wasn't my intention." "Your intention?" Sophia laughed bitterly. "Your intention was to humiliate Mom in front of everyone we know and love. Your intention was to make sure she couldn't respond without looking hysterical. Well, congratulations, Dad. It worked perfectly, except for one thing." She turned to Amber, her expression softening slightly. "Mom, I need you to know that everyone at that restaurant was on your side. Grandma Clark told me she always knew you were too good for him. Uncle Marcus said he lost respect for Dad the moment those words left his mouth. And Tyler." She paused, fresh tears threatening. "Tyler asked me if you needed anything, if there was anything he could do to help." Amber's heart warmed at the thought of Sophia's boyfriend, a young army lieutenant who'd always treated her with genuine respect and affection. David's phone buzzed again, and this time Sophia snatched it from his hands before he could react. "Victoria again?" she asked, scrolling through the messages. Her face grew paler as she read. "Oh my God, Dad. She's asking about the bank transfers. She's asking when you're going to dump the deadweight and join her at the apartment." Sophia looked up at her father with disgust. "Deadweight? That's what you call Mom? The woman who supported your dreams for 26 years. "Give me my phone," David demanded, but his authority had completely evaporated. "No," Sophia said firmly. "I think I'll keep this for now. Mom might find these messages interesting for her legal case." Amber watched the dynamic between father and daughter with fascination. Sophia had always been close to David, but she was seeing him clearly for the first time, and she didn't like what she saw. "You know what the worst part is?" Sophia continued, settling into the chair across from her father. "I've known something was wrong for months. You've been different. Distracted. Always on your phone, disappearing for hours, buying new clothes and cologne. I thought maybe you were planning something special for your anniversary next month." David's face crumpled. He had forgotten their anniversary was approaching. "Instead, I find out you've been planning the destruction of our family," Sophia said. "And Mom." She turned to Amber. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening?" Amber moved to sit beside her daughter, taking her hand. "Because it wasn't your burden to carry. You were finishing your final semester, preparing for graduation, starting your career. I didn't want your father's choices to overshadow your achievements. But I could have helped. I could have been here for you." "You are here for me," Amber said gently. "Right now, when it matters most." David cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Sophia, you need to understand that your mother and we've grown apart. Sometimes people change and..." "People change." Sophia stood up abruptly. You didn't change, Dad. You chose to lie, cheat, and steal from your own family. Mom didn't grow apart from you, you abandoned her while she was still fighting for your marriage. She pulled out her own phone and showed David the screen. I've been getting texts all afternoon from our friends and relatives. Do you want to know what they're saying? David looked like he might be sick. Cousin Rebecca said she saw you and Victoria at the Ocean House in Kiowa Island last month, holding hands during their jazz brunch. Aunt Patricia said Victoria has been bragging to her book club about dating a successful businessman who is going to leave his wife for her. And Mrs. Henderson from next door? She's been watching Victoria's car in our driveway when Mom was at work. Each revelation hit David like a physical blow. His secret affair hadn't been nearly as secret as he'd believed. The whole neighborhood knows, Dad. Our whole extended family knows. You've made Mom look like a fool, and you've embarrassed our entire family. Amber squeezed Sophia's hand. Actually, sweetheart, I don't think your father has made me look foolish at all. Both David and Sophia turned to look at her, surprised by her tone. You see, there's something I haven't told either of you yet, Amber continued, her voice taking on a different quality, confident, almost playful. About what I've been doing these past few months, while your father was busy planning his new life. What had Amber been secretly planning that would turn the tables completely? And how far ahead of David's game had she really been? Amber rose from her chair with the fluid grace of a woman who held all the cards, moving to the antique secretary desk where she kept her personal papers. David and Sophia watched her every movement, both realizing that the calm, composed woman before them had been orchestrating something far more complex than they'd imagined. 3 months ago, Amber began, pulling out a leather portfolio, I noticed irregularities in our joint checking account. Small transfers at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. Most wives might have confronted their husbands immediately. She turned to face David, her expression serene. But I've been managing finances professionally for over 20 years. I recognize patterns. David's face was growing paler by the minute, but he said nothing. So instead of confronting you, I decided to investigate. And what I discovered was far more extensive than your simple affair with Victoria Sterling. She opened the portfolio, revealing organized sections of documents. I found evidence of a systematic financial plan spanning 18 months. You weren't just cheating, David. You were preparing for economic warfare. Sophia leaned forward, fascinated despite her anger. What kind of evidence, Mom? Your father opened 3 separate accounts at different banks. He's been moving money gradually to avoid triggering automatic notifications on our joint accounts. He purchased a car, a BMW convertible, that's registered in Victoria's name but paid for with our money. He put deposits down on beachfront property in Myrtle Beach and a luxury condo in downtown Charleston. David finally found his voice. Those were investments. Business opportunities that. Business opportunities? Amber's laugh was soft but deadly. David, I called every single property management company and real estate agent involved. I spoke to Victoria's ex-husband, who had some very interesting things to say about her financial expectations in relationships. The color drained completely from David's face. You contacted Victoria's ex-husband? Thomas Sterling was very helpful, actually. Apparently, Victoria has a pattern. She targets men she believes are wealthy, convinces them to make expensive purchases in her name, and then, well, let's just say you're not her first married man. Sophia gasped. She's done this before? 3 times, according to Thomas. Her first marriage ended when she cleaned out their joint accounts and ran off with her tennis instructor. Her second relationship was with a real estate developer who discovered she'd forged his signature on several property transfers. And her third victim was a restaurant owner who lost his business after she convinced him to put everything in her name for tax purposes. David sank back into the couch, his head in his hands. That's impossible. Victoria loves me. She understands my dreams, my potential. Your potential bank account, Amber corrected gently. David, she's been telling her friends that you're worth over $2 million. She has no idea that most of our assets are in my name, protected by the prenup you insisted on, and that your business ventures have been operating at a loss for the past 3 years. The silence in the room was deafening. Sophia looked between her parents, trying to process the magnitude of her father's deception and her mother's detective work. "There's more," Amber continued, and David's head snapped up in alarm. "I hired a private investigator to document your activities. Not just the affair, but the financial fraud. Every restaurant dinner you paid for with our joint credit card. Every hotel room, every gift, every lie you told to cover your tracks." She pulled out a thick folder of photographs and handed it to Sophia, who flipped through them with growing shock. "This is from the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills," Sophia said, holding up a photo. "Dad, you told us you were at a craft beer convention in San Diego that weekend." "And this one," she continued, "is from Victoria's apartment. Mom, how did you get pictures from inside her place?" "Victoria's neighbor, Mrs. Chun, is one of my clients at the bank. She mentioned seeing a married man coming and going at all hours. When I described your father, she confirmed it was him. She was happy to help document his visits from her balcony." David's phone, still in Sophia's possession, began ringing. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo David had obviously taken of her, a sultry selfie that made Sophia wrinkle her nose in disgust. "Should I answer it?" Sophia asked wickedly. "Actually," Amber said, her voice taking on an almost playful tone, "why don't we put her on speaker? I think it's time Victoria learned the truth about her knight in shining armor." David lunged forward. "No. Absolutely not. This is private between." "Private." Sophia stood up, holding the phone out of his reach. "Dad, you announced your affair to 43 people at a public restaurant. Privacy isn't really on the table anymore." She answered the phone and immediately hit speaker. "David, thank God." Victoria's voice filled the room, breathless and panicked. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. There's a problem with the apartment lease, and the bank is saying there are issues with the down payment on the beach house. They're asking for additional financial verification, and I don't understand." "Victoria," Amber said calmly, and the phone went silent. "Who is this?" Victoria's voice was sharp now, defensive. "This is Amber Caldwell, David's wife." A long pause. Then, "David, what the hell is going on? Why is she on your phone?" "It's a fair question," Amber said before David could respond. "You see, Victoria, there seem to be some misunderstandings about David's financial situation. And your legal situation, for that matter." "My legal situation?" Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "Yes. You see, all those property transactions you've been making with my husband? They were funded with money that legally belongs to me. That's called fraud, Victoria. And given your history with Thomas Sterling and your previous relationships, I think the district attorney might be very interested in discussing a pattern of financial exploitation." The phone went dead. Victoria had hung up. With Victoria now aware that her perfect plan was crumbling, what desperate moves might she make? And what was Amber's ultimate endgame for the man who had betrayed her so completely? The silence after Victoria's abrupt hang-up was broken by the sound of David's ragged breathing. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life collapse in real time, which, Amber reflected, was exactly what had happened. "She'll be back," David said weakly. "Victoria wouldn't just abandon everything we've planned." Sophia and Amber exchanged glances that held 20 years of shared understanding. Even now, David was clinging to his delusions. "Dad," Sophia said gently, as if speaking to a confused child, "she just learned that her sugar daddy is actually broke and that she might be facing fraud charges. I don't think Victoria's coming back." As if summoned by their conversation, David's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed an unknown number. "Answer it," Amber suggested. "But keep it on speaker. I think we're all curious about what happens next." David reluctantly took the call. A man's voice filled the room, deep, authoritative, with a slight southern accent. "This is Detective Ray Morrison with Charleston PD. I'm trying to reach David Caldwell regarding some financial irregularities that have been reported." "Mr. Caldwell," Are you available to come in for questioning? David's face went white. What kind of irregularities? Sir, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come to the station this evening, or would you prefer we come to you? Amber stepped forward. Detective Morrison, this is Amber Caldwell, David's wife. I'm the one who filed the complaint. David will be there within the hour. After Detective Morrison ended the call, David turned to Amber with a mixture of fury and desperation. You called the police? On your own husband? I called them about the financial fraud, Amber corrected. The fact that it was committed by my husband is just an unfortunate detail. Sophia was staring at her mother with a new kind of respect. Mom, you really thought of everything, didn't you? Not everything, Amber admitted. I never anticipated that Victoria would be quite so predictable, or that your father would choose such a public forum for his announcement. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He looked at it and groaned. Victoria? Sophia asked. Her landlord, David said miserably. Apparently, she's decided to move out of Charleston immediately. She's telling him that there's been a family emergency in Atlanta and she needs to break her lease. How convenient, Amber observed. And the apartment you two were supposed to share? She said she can't afford the rent without my contribution. Another text came through, this one from Victoria herself. David, I can't deal with this drama. I thought you had your life together, but this is too complicated. I'm moving back to Atlanta to be closer to my sister. Don't contact me. Sophia read the message aloud, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Oh Dad. It looks like your great love story is over. But David wasn't ready to give up. This is all your fault, Amber. If you hadn't called the police, hadn't interfered, Victoria and I could have worked things out. Worked what out? Amber's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. The fraud charges? The fact that she's been lying to you about her feelings? Or the fact that she's already moved on to her next victim? David's phone rang again. This time, it was a number he recognized, his business partner, Jake Morrison. I have to take this, David said, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. But in the open floor plan of their home, his conversation was still audible. Jake, thank God you called. I need a favor. No, I can't explain right now, but I need you to transfer some funds from the business account. What do you mean, what business account? Our partnership account. What are you talking about? David's voice grew louder and more frantic. What do you mean you dissolved the partnership? When? Last month? But you never told me. What lawyers? Amber and Sophia listened as David's voice cracked with each revelation. When he returned to the living room, he looked like a broken man. Jake dissolved our business partnership last month, David said, sinking into his chair. Apparently, he'd been getting complaints from distributors about late deliveries and unpaid invoices. He said he tried to reach me, but you were busy with Victoria, Sophia finished. The business is gone. My credit cards are maxed out from all the gifts and trips. And now Victoria's gone too. Amber felt a flicker of the old compassion she'd once felt for this man, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the memory of his cruelty at the restaurant, his calculated plan to humiliate her. David, she said quietly, I want you to understand something. Everything that's happening to you right now, the financial consequences, the legal issues, the loss of Victoria, these are the natural results of your choices. Not my revenge, not some vindictive scheme. Just consequences. David looked up at her, and for a moment, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago, vulnerable, lost human. I know, he said quietly. I know I've ruined everything. But Amber, surely there's some way we can. I mean, 26 years of marriage has to count for something. Before Amber could respond, there was a knock at the front door. Through the window, they could see a police cruiser in the driveway. That would be Detective Morrison, Amber said. I told him you'd be coming to the station, but I suppose he decided to save you the trip. David stood slowly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. Will you visit me if they arrest me? Amber considered the question seriously. I don't know, David. I honestly don't know. As the police officers entered their home, the home where they'd raised their daughter, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, dreamed of their future together, Amber felt the last chapter of her old life closing. But instead of sadness, what she felt most strongly was relief. As David was led away in handcuffs, what new chapter was about to begin for Amber? And what final surprise did she have in store that would complete her transformation from betrayed wife to empowered woman? 6 months after David's arrest, Amber stood in the renovated carriage house behind their Magnolia Street home, looking out at the garden where she'd spent so many mornings contemplating her marriage. The space had been transformed into something she dreamed of for years but never dared pursue, the headquarters of Amber Clark Financial Consulting, a firm specializing in financial security for women in transition. The irony wasn't lost on her. David's betrayal had inadvertently given her the push she needed to build something entirely her own. "Mom, the journalist from Charleston magazine is here for your interview," Sophia called from the main office. At 23, Sophia had moved back to Charleston after spending 6 months in Atlanta with Tyler, who'd been transferred to Fort Gordon. She'd taken a position as marketing coordinator for Amber's growing business, bringing her engineering precision to brand development and client relations. "Tell her I'll be right there," Amber replied, smoothing her burgundy silk blouse, a far cry from the muted colors she'd worn during her marriage, when David had constantly critiqued her appearance. These days, she dressed for herself, and the confidence showed in every graceful movement. The journalist, Rebecca Torres from Charleston magazine, was a striking woman in her 40s who'd built a reputation for in-depth profiles of successful Southern businesswomen. She'd been eager to interview Amber after her story had become somewhat legendary in Charleston's professional circles, the devoted wife who'd turned her husband's public betrayal into a thriving business empire. "Ms. Clark," Rebecca said, rising from the vintage leather chair Amber had chosen specifically for client meetings, warm but professional, inviting but not overly intimate. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview. I have to say, your story has captured a lot of attention in the business community." "Please call me Amber," she replied, settling across from Rebecca with the poise of someone who'd learned to command rooms filled with skeptical clients and impressed investors. "And I'm happy to share my experience if it helps other women." Rebecca activated her recorder. "Let's start with the beginning. 6 months ago, you were primarily known as David Caldwell's wife. Today, you're running one of Charleston's fastest-growing financial consulting firms. Tell me about that transformation." Amber considered her words carefully. She'd learned to tell her story in a way that empowered rather than victimized, that focused on her strategic thinking rather than David's betrayal. "I think many women reach a point where they realize they've been playing smaller than their capabilities," she began. "My husband's actions forced me to confront the fact that I'd been financially supporting our family for years while allowing him to take credit for our stability. When that arrangement ended, I discovered I was more than capable of building something significant on my own." "Your client base has grown to over 200 women in just 6 months, Rebecca noted. "What's driving that demand?" "Financial abuse is far more common than people realize," Amber explained, warming to a topic she'd become passionate about. "It's not always as dramatic as what I experienced. Sometimes it's as simple as one partner controlling all the accounts, or making financial decisions without consultation, or convincing their spouse that they're not good with money, when the opposite is true." She gestured to the testimonials framed on her office walls, letters from clients who'd successfully navigated divorces, started businesses, or simply gained confidence in managing their own finances. "I help women understand their true financial position, plan for independence, and protect themselves legally. It's about knowledge becoming power." Rebecca leaned forward. "Speaking of legal protection, your ex-husband recently accepted a plea deal for financial fraud. How do you feel about that outcome?" Amber had known this question was coming. David had received 3 years of probation and substantial fines, which many had considered a light sentence. Victoria Sterling had never been charged. She'd apparently learned from her previous experiences and had been careful to stay on the legal side of fraud, even if the ethical lines were blurred. "I feel satisfied that justice was served appropriately," Amber said diplomatically. "More importantly, the legal process validated what I'd suspected for months, that systematic financial deception had been occurring." That validation was important for my own healing. And your daughter, Sophia? How has she adjusted to these changes? Amber's expression softened. Sophia has been remarkable. She initially struggled with anger toward her father, which was natural. But she's channeled that into something positive. She's become incredibly protective of women in similar situations and has been instrumental in developing our client communication strategies. I understand she's also engaged? Yes, Amber smiled genuinely for the first time during the interview. Tyler proposed last month. He's a wonderful young man, honest, supportive, and he treats Sophia as an equal partner. It's the kind of relationship I want her to have. Rebecca made some notes. Let's talk about the personal side. Are you dating? Ready for romance again? It was a question Amber had been asked frequently, often by well-meaning friends who seemed to think her happiness required another relationship. I'm in love, she said, and Rebecca looked up with interest. I'm in love with my life, my work, my independence. I'm in love with the woman I've become when I'm not trying to accommodate someone else's ego or insecurities. She paused, choosing her words carefully. That doesn't mean I'm closed to companionship in the future. But any relationship I enter now will be as a complete, independent person who chooses to share her life, not someone looking to be completed or rescued. That's a powerful perspective. What advice would you give to women who might be in situations similar to what you experienced? Trust your instincts, Amber said immediately. If something feels wrong with your finances, your relationship, or your life, investigate. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or dramatic. And most importantly, develop your own financial knowledge and independence, even if your marriage is solid. Security comes from knowing you could take care of yourself if you had to. Rebecca nodded, scribbling notes. Final question, do you have any regrets about how you handled your situation? Amber was quiet for a long moment, considering. I regret that my marriage ended the way it did. I regret that Sophia had to witness her father's poor choices. But I don't regret standing up for myself, protecting my assets, or building the life I have now. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. As Rebecca packed up her equipment, Sophia appeared in the doorway. Mom, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Mrs. Patterson from Mount Pleasant, she says her husband has been acting suspicious about their retirement accounts. Amber rose, smoothing her skirt. Another woman, another story of financial deception and broken trust. But also another opportunity to help someone reclaim their power and security. Thank you for your time, Amber, Rebecca said. I think this article is going to inspire a lot of women. I hope so, Amber replied. Everyone deserves to feel secure in their own life. As Amber prepared to help another woman navigate financial betrayal, a surprise visitor was about to arrive who would test everything she'd built and force her to confront one final piece of her past. The knock on Amber's office door came at exactly 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before her last appointment of the day. Sophia had gone home early to have dinner with Tyler, who was visiting for the weekend, leaving Amber alone in the converted carriage house that had become her sanctuary. We're closed, she called out, not looking up from the financial analysis she was preparing for tomorrow's client consultation. The evening light was streaming through the tall windows, casting everything in a golden glow that made her workspace feel almost magical. Amber, it's me. The voice stopped her cold. She hadn't heard it in 6 months, not since the day Detective Morrison had led him away in handcuffs. David's voice was different now, quieter, humbler, stripped of the arrogant charm that had once drawn her to him like a moth to flame. She took a deep breath, centered herself in the confidence she'd built over these months of independence, and walked to the door. When she opened it, she barely recognized the man standing on her doorstep. David had lost at least 30 pounds, his once full face now gaunt and shadowed. His expensively styled silver hair had grown out, showing gray roots and uneven patches. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, nothing like the designer clothes he'd once insisted on. But it was his eyes that showed the most dramatic change. The cockiness was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. "Hello, David," she said calmly, not moving aside to let him in. "You look He paused, taking in her appearance, the confident posture, the expensive but tasteful clothing, the glow of someone who'd found her purpose. You look incredible, Amber. Truly. Thank you. What are you doing here? I wanted to see you before I leave Charleston. To apologize properly and to... He gestured helplessly. To try to make some kind of amends, I suppose. Despite everything, Amber felt a flicker of curiosity. Where are you going? Asheville, North Carolina. My cousin Marcus offered me a job at his furniture restoration business. It's manual labor mostly, but it's honest work. And it's far enough away that I won't be a constant reminder of everything. Amber studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But what she saw was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine remorse. Would you like to come in? She heard herself asking. Just for a few minutes. David's relief was palpable. Yes, thank you. She led him into her office, noting how his eyes took in everything, the framed business license, the client testimonials, the professional furniture that spoke of success and independence. This is amazing, Amber, he said softly. I always knew you were capable of something like this, but I was too selfish to encourage it. Yes, you were, she agreed, settling behind her desk while he took the client chair. The power dynamic was clear. This was her space, her territory, her rules. I've been going to therapy, David said without preamble. Court-ordered at first, but I've continued on my own. Dr. Rodriguez has helped me understand some things about myself that I never wanted to face. Amber waited, saying nothing. I was terrified of your strength, he continued, his voice growing steadier. Even when we first got married, you were smarter, more capable, more financially savvy than I was. Instead of celebrating that or learning from it, I spent 26 years trying to diminish it so I could feel like the man I thought I was supposed to be. That's quite an insight, Amber said carefully. The affair with Victoria wasn't really about love, or even attraction. It was about finding someone who looked up to me the way you used to, before you realized you were carrying both of us. David's hands were clasped tightly in his lap. She made me feel important, successful, powerful. Everything I knew I wasn't when I was honest with myself. Amber felt something she hadn't expected, pity. Not for the choices David had made, but for the insecurity that had driven them. Why are you telling me this, David? Because you deserve an explanation that isn't about my needs or my feelings. Because I want you to know that what happened wasn't a failure on your part. You were an incredible wife, mother, and partner. I was just too threatened by your capabilities to appreciate them. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, like the one she'd given him at the restaurant 6 months ago. What's that? She asked. My resignation from any claim to your future, he said, placing it on her desk. I've signed over my remaining rights to the house, agreed to reasonable visitation terms with Sophia once she's ready, and I've written a letter that you can use if anyone ever questions your character or your choices during our marriage. Amber picked up the envelope but didn't open it. That's very thoughtful of you. It's the least I could do. David stood, recognizing that their conversation was coming to an end. I also wanted you to know that I heard about Tyler's proposal to Sophia. I won't be at the wedding. I know my presence would only cause stress, but I wanted you to know that I'm grateful she has someone who treats her the way she deserves. The way I deserved, Amber said quietly. Yes. The way you deserved. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to understand that. They stood in silence for a moment, 26 years of shared history hanging between them, the good memories and the painful ones, the dreams they'd built together and the reality that had torn them apart. I should go, David said finally. David, Amber called as he reached the door. I hope you find peace in North Carolina. I hope you find a way to be the man you wanted to be. Thank you, he said, his hand on the doorknob. And Amber? I hope you find someone worthy of the woman you've become. After he left, Amber sat in her office as the last light faded from the windows. She felt oddly empty, as if some part of her that had been braced for battle could finally relax. The anger that had sustained her through the divorce, the hurt that had motivated her to build her business, the determination that had carried her through the darkest months, all of it felt different now. Not gone, but transformed into something softer and more sustainable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Tyler and I are making dinner at the main house. Join us? We have news to share beyond the engagement." Amber smiled, gathering her things and turning off the lights in her office. As she walked the stone path from the carriage house to her home, not theirs anymore, she felt lighter than she had in years. Inside, the kitchen was filled with laughter and the smell of Tyler's famous low country boil. Sophia was wearing an apron that read "Future Mrs. Patterson," and Tyler was telling an animated story about his commanding officer's attempts at Southern cooking. "Mom," Sophia called out, "perfect timing. We were just talking about the wedding plans, and Tyler has an idea for the ceremony that involves his entire unit doing a sword arch." As Amber settled into the warm chaos of her daughter's happiness, she realized that David's visit had given her something unexpected: closure. Not forgiveness exactly, but a sense of completion that allowed her to fully embrace the life she'd built from the ashes of her marriage. The woman who had once defined herself as a wife and mother had discovered she was so much more. Financial advisor, business owner, mentor, and friend. But most importantly, she was Amber Clark, whole, independent, and ready for whatever came next. Amber's story became one of Charleston's most talked about transformations, inspiring countless women to examine their own financial security and personal power. Her business continued to thrive, and while she never remarried, she did eventually find love again, with herself first, and later with someone who celebrated her strength rather than fearing it. As for David, he found the peace he was seeking in North Carolina, building furniture and learning to live with the consequences of his choices. Sophia and Tyler married the following spring in a ceremony that celebrated new beginnings, with Amber walking her daughter down the aisle, a symbolic moment that captured her journey from traditional wife to empowered woman perfectly.